And welcome to Jags Chat Lounge, and still talking about divorced, separated and single parents. But we also have today on our show Gurvinder Bassi, who is a solicitor in family law from GLS Solicitors. Thank you, Gurvinder, for joining us today.
Thanks, Jags. Thanks for having me on the show, and it's nice to see that you're bringing a live issue to the fore and discussing it.
Thank you. I just felt it was really important because I think from myself and also within the media, and obviously for yourself, must be really busy with the work that you do within family law itself. I just wanted to know, for someone who is probably thinking about going through, I don't want to mention divorce so much, but how would you, for us, we always say divorce. What are the correct terms?
Yeah, I think that's an important point you make. Divorce, especially within the Asian community, is still sort of seen as a taboo subject. A lot of Asians, joyous people, we love to dance and party and sing, and we have these big fat Indian weddings, and sort of divorce is something that is live, that does happen, but we tend not to discuss as much as we should. I always say, if somebody's in a relationship, it's not working out, you should in the very least consider your options. There are children involved, there are assets. It's important to take advice. In terms of people like me, there's a sort of 150,000 of me in the country, albeit not everybody will do family law. So the importance of tackling an issue that you're possibly wanting to face head on is to take advice, get legal advice, and sometimes we rely on people that aren't professionals or can't give the advice, or somebody that's gone through an experience, but every case can be different, or we jump on the internet.
And I think that's the main, I think for everyone, social media, isn't it? And it's yes, as you said, you jump onto the internet, it's all about, let's Google everything. Yeah. So would you say that would be a correct way of probably because if we want to research anything, straight away we're going to Google. What would your advice be? Is it better coming to someone like yourself who's practiced it, who's in with the laws and the legislations and everything, or just quick thing on Google? And what are the differences?
Yeah, the dangers on Google can be that you Google divorce and you suddenly start seeing terms such as quickie divorce, and the media tends to sometimes focus on the acrimony, on the hostility that sometimes takes place when the divorce process starts, rather than concentrating on how things can be settled amicably, by way of discussion, by appointing legal representatives that can possibly help settle matters, reduce the temperature, and reach a quick conclusion. In respect of your question, where you say, look, what's the better choice, or what are the differences? Obviously, a legal qualified professional is going to know the laws, and is going to know what the legislation states, what your situation is. They can advise upon that. It could be a very short marriage, it could be a long marriage. As I mentioned before, there could be children involved, there could be various assets involved, and nowadays that's not only in the UK, but there could be assets abroad. There could be a need to tackle matters head on very quickly. It may be the case that somebody's only got married 2 months ago, they want to get divorced, but there's a bar on bringing a petition within the first year, so you can't get married within the first year. You can't get divorced within the first year.
And why is that?
There's a bar on bringing a petition. You have to remain married for a year. There is a slight technicality there. in that you could apply for an annulment, okay?
Right.
But there again are certain factors that allow you to apply for an annulment, which really argues whether the marriage is void or voidable.
Right.
So, for example, an annulment will concentrate on, say, the marriage wasn't consummated, okay? Maybe you find out later your partner was underage. Maybe you find that, in an extreme circumstance, they were pregnant with somebody else's child at the time you got married. So there are technical factors, but generally you cannot get divorced until you've been married a year.
So someone who wanted to say that they got married, they obviously found out about their husband or their wife. All right, 2 months. So even if it's like 6 months, they don't necessarily have to still live with them. Is that correct? So even if they want to go, they don't have to, even though they're legally married, they don't have to still be living with them. Is that correct? They do?
Well,
they don't.
No, they don't. They don't. If you decide to get separated, you don't have to. Given that you're married, you don't have to live under the same roof. Obviously, any happily married, loving couple is going to want to stay under one roof and progress upon the marriage itself. But if they've decided to separate, then they're going to want to possibly live under separate roofs and maybe in different properties. And that usually is where you start thinking about physically you've separated, then you start thinking about the legalities.
Have you ever had any cases where either the male or the female, they've come to yourself and they said, look, it's been 7-8 months we've been married, either the husband or the wife is drinking a lot and I can't live under these circumstances, and maybe they've had a child either before the marriage and that's the reason to why they actually got married. Obviously there's a danger there for the child itself. Then would that be still voidable, or would it be considered that the child's safety there as well, isn't it?
It's quite a technical question you've asked there, Jags, which is quite good. So say that they've already had a child, but then they got married. Say they didn't consummate the marriage. Technically, they could possibly go for an annulment.
Right.
If they had consummated the marriage after getting married, they'd still have to wait a year before getting divorced.
So it's always still after a year that you have to, okay.
Yeah, that's for the divorce. Now, another important factor you raise, and it's taken us into another section of family law, is there's a child involved. Say if the parties, husband and wife, separate, they're living under two separate roofs, you can't sort of split the child. The child's either going to go with mom or dad. In a lot of cases it is mom that the child stays with, and in a lot of cases I see it happily with dad's consent, but sometimes the acrimony can lead to mom saying, well, I don't want you seeing child. Dad could be saying, well, I want to see child a little bit more than you're allowing me to, and both parties can start to become unreasonable over the child. And when a divorce is afoot, sometimes I've seen cases, unfortunately, where the child can be used as a weapon almost, in terms of trying to get brownie points or score points over one another. In time I see that sort of fizzles out, and mother and father who are fighting as husband and wife realise they are mother and father, and sort of try and address the needs of the child. Of course, if they don't agree, that matter can end up in court. There's an act, the Children Act 1989, where either party can make an application to the court and say, look, we can't reach any agreement in respect of this child. We'd like the help of the court. And the court then has various principles within which it assesses how the needs of this child or children can be met, and the child's welfare is of paramount consideration to the court.
Yes.
Okay? That they place that even when property and finance is being dealt with as part of a divorce, the court will look at what's going to happen with the children. Are their needs being met? Okay. With the children, there's various factors the court takes into consideration. The child's wishes and feelings, whether what changes they're going to be in their circumstances, are there any risks that come from that, their emotional, physical, educational needs. So there's quite a few things, their background, their character, their age. Sometimes children can be asked as to what their wishes and feelings are.
Yeah.
Okay, a child that's 3 or 4 might not be able to express as well as a child that's maybe 10, 11 or 12. And if the court sees that it's obviously a battle between the parents, the court may take upon itself to ask the children's opinion and take some sense of reality as to what the situation is.
I mean, I don't know if this is a trick question or if it's probably happened in any cases where the parents haven't made a decision of like the kids, or the children haven't made a decision who they want to be with, and it's left in the court's hands. Has the court ever made a wrong decision? In some cases, obviously not.
Well, I think the court will always think it's made the right decision, and then it's up to the individuals to appeal that decision if they think necessary. Usually, courts now hold, and again it's important to emphasise, 5 or 6 years ago, possibly a little bit longer than that, the court said that before you come to us about any issues to do with children, we want you to attend what we call mediation. So you go to a mediator, you both express your concerns, the mediator talks to mom, talks to dad, and they try and help you mediate and reach a decision without going to court. So the court does all it can to say, look, we're not a last resort, but we try and resolve this because there's a child involved, a young person that you shouldn't really be battling about in court. That's not to say that that there aren't situations where matters don't end up in court. I'll give you a snapshot. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been instructed in a matter where I'm talking to a gentleman in Canada who is trying to get access to contact with a child here in the UK. I've been involved in a matter up north where mother feels that father may abduct child and take child out of country. So there are circumstances and cases where you do need the help of the court, and sometimes it's pretty urgent. Okay, that there's a feeling that when an outsider hears about people battling in court, that they're spending a lot of money on lawyers, they're having a fight, but sometimes you do need the assistance of the court, okay, to prevent removal, abduction, to smaller but still significant issues like possibly a child being removed from a school. To say a child is 7 or 8 years old and mom or dad have suddenly decided to take them out from a school and move from, say, Birmingham to Leicester. So the court's intervention is sometimes needed because it is needed. In terms of a court getting a decision wrong, a court, a judge, a bench which is formed of magistrates will decide any case on the facts that are presented to them.
Yeah. So it's the evidence.
And what's then available to anybody that's aggrieved at the decision is to say, look, we're not happy, we're going to appeal. And then you can work through the court process. So we hear words such as the High Court or Court of Appeal or Supreme Court bandied about. It's where people try and go through various avenues to have decisions overturned.
So who does the child stay with then, while this appeal is taking place?
Well, if an appeal took place, it would mean that there was a judgment that was already withstanding.
Yeah.
So the judgment will still be complied with, or have to be complied with, until it was overturned later on, or if it was overturned. So the status quo of the judgment would be preserved, and then you judge what happened in an appeal.
And I suppose in this case it's the welfare of the child as well. It's sometimes a child can't always, as like you mentioned, they can't always express how they feel and stuff. They want their mummy and daddy together, but it's not happening, and it's the pulling and which way do we go and all that, and it does affect a child, or even the children as well.
Yes.
You could have a few children together, and it's just what happens in circumstances like that. I mean, is there support that is offered to the children? I know obviously there's mediation for the parents, but what about for the children? Is there any kind of counselling that's available, or you'd probably say look, it's affecting the child.
Yeah.
This is what we'd like to offer as a support from
the courts. Do offer a lot of support by sending the parents on programs. An organisation called CAFCAS gets involved. Okay. Talks to.
Do you just want to explain a bit about CAFCAS for anyone who's watching? They may not understand. What.
So CAFCAS, whenever a Children Act application is accepted and received by the court, CAFCAS are immediately alerted. They're an organisation that assists the court. Okay. Right. An independent organisation, and they then conduct safeguarding checks. So they'll check that they have the authority to check the police record with social services. They will talk to mum and dad and present that information to the court.
Right. Okay.
It's also a way of alerting mum and dad that this isn't just a battle between them and a prospective judge. Another organisation is involved. Okay. CAFCAS can then be instructed to carry out more detailed reports if there are more issues and more serious issues. As you say, the welfare of the child is of paramount importance to the court. So the court could say, well, we need CAFCAS to carry out what's sometimes referred to as a Section 7 report. It's a much more detailed report. Mum might be saying, I don't like Dad's circumstances where he's living. Dad might be saying, well, my child's not spending all that time with Mum. She's out and about all the time, or various allegations can be raised. And then it's up to an independent body to go out and assess. So CAFCAS will go out and meet mum and dad. They will check where they're living. They will also observe contact between child and parent, and then report that to the court. So it's important. And another way I see it's important is that it gives parents a reality check to say, well, they will easily be found out if this is a vendetta between the two, or they're having a grudge match and using the child as a weapon almost in getting those brownie points against each other. So I think the system as it is pretty well placed, especially in Children Act matters. As you rightly say, not everybody's happy with the result. Sometimes one party is left more aggrieved than the other. But in my experience, sometimes I talk to clients that I acted for 5-6 years ago, and they say, look, the situation's got a lot better. We are now able to have a civil conversation. They drop-offs, we get involved, we say hello to each other, and it's very civil because we recognise there's a child that's impacted every time there's a disagreement between us or there's some vitriol or there's some anger, and children are astute people. They sort of pick this up automatically. Yeah. They're sponges.
That's it.
So it's an interesting area of law. Every case rests on its own facts. I've acted in matters where parties are living sort of 150 miles, 200 miles apart. I mentioned where I'm acting for somebody that's in a different jurisdiction, and sometimes you are acting for somebody that is literally 2 streets away. And of course, within the Asian community, it's not just about mum and dad. There's mussies involved, and there's bibi, baba, nana, nani, and
the family tends to get. It's the family that gets involved as well, isn't it?
And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes I've seen matters where that can be a bad thing, because there's so many voices being directed or people being pulled and pushed in certain directions, that it can change the way sort of a case flows or should flow.
I mean, all right. So, talked about family, and from the Asian community. I know that, like, with some, like, for example, they've had a love marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Hunky dory, absolutely great between them.
Yeah.
Obviously, the girl who's moved into the daughter-in-law, she's finding it now very difficult to get on with the family. But the guy, because he loves his mum and dad, he doesn't want to leave the house. Sometimes, I'm not saying all, some parents, or especially mums, they love their sons to bits.
Yeah.
Every parent loves their children to bits, and
Indeed.
they're always still their baby. So then, obviously, a girl comes in, suddenly has taken over. Oh my God, I'm losing my son in some ways and everything. I don't like her. So there's conflict between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. The son is then in between, but then at the same time it's causing friction and conflict between husband and wife as well.
Yeah.
Because the mom or whoever else is in the household is causing. It's not even between themselves, it's because of the family.
Yeah.
So if someone was to come over, say for example, the wife was to come over and say, look, I love my husband to bits and everything, I'm just finding it very difficult, I just feel I can't be in this relationship at all. I just feel I just need to just leave. They've got no kids at all. Yes, okay, it's probably a year or 2 into the marriage. So then, what happens then? If she's filing for a divorce, or she wants.
Well, look, when I've seen matters where, as you put it, sometimes mother-in-law's feeling aggrieved. I've seen matters where daughter-in-law wants to take control. I've seen matters where son doesn't help the situation, and I've seen matters where son is tremendously trying to help the situation, but it still isn't working out. So I've seen it all, and I've seen really good sort of daughter-in-laws that should be an example to the family, and I've seen really good mother-in-laws, but on the converse side I've seen sort of negatives as well. Okay, in terms of, in that scenario, if daughter-in-law were to leave and say, look, I want to petition for a divorce, she would have to prove to the court that the marriage had irretrievably broken down. Okay, so there was no chance of repair and there was no going back, and then she'd have to rely on one of 5 facts. Okay. The first fact is adultery. Okay, she suspected her husband of having an affair with somebody. She suspected, she thought his behaviour to be unreasonable, so unreasonable behaviour. And then the latter 3 are, you've been separated for more than 2 years and you both consent. The third is you've been separated for more than 5 years and you can obtain that divorce without the consent of the other party. And the final one is that for the last 2 years you don't know where your husband or wife are. Okay, so they've deserted you. They've gone missing. you don't know where they are. So in your scenario, you didn't mention any adultery. It would be unreasonable behaviour because she's just left. It wouldn't be separated for more than 2 years, separated for more than 5 years. She knows exactly where her husband is. He's at the house with Mum. So it would be behaviour, and she'd have to list allegations of unreasonable behaviour. Usually that's sort of a list of why she thinks her husband, and we're going by your example, the behaviour was bad. Now, I think we were discussing just before we came on to the show about the law in this country is slowly going to change.
Yes.
This law has been going since 1973, and or by way of an act in 1973, the Matrimonial Causes Act, and as you can see, in order to get a divorce, you have to allege fault. You have to find fault. Recently, last year, there was a consultation, and the law is going to change now in this country. We don't know when exactly, but it's going to change to a more no-fault basis, where you don't really have to find fault. You can just petition for a divorce without making allegations. Now, there's pros and cons for that. There's people that say, fantastic, at least we can keep the temperature down. When two parties have decided to separate, it's all, they don't have to play a blame game. But on the other hand, people are arguing that if it's that easy to get divorced, the sanctity of marriage decreases, so the value of marriage itself. So lots of people may get married to think, well, I might as well get married because it's so easy to get divorced. So we'll see. Statistics are proving that in countries where there's no fault divorce, usually the rate falls. But it remains to be seen how this jurisdiction, or certainly a jurisdiction I can act in England and Wales, reacts to it. But that's in the future.
I mean, talking about like the divorce and I mean, I was very interested to know, obviously, the statistics of the divorce, and when did the divorce rate start to increase? I mean, whether it's here or whether it's like abroad or it's like the same. When was that increased then?
I think when I first heard from you, you said, Gurvinder, if you can find some statistics, which got me thinking. Sometimes we're so busy in our day-to-day jobs that we lose sight of the bigger picture and what's going on, or possibly on a national scale. There's a governmental arm that releases statistics, the Office for National Statistics. They released 2017's figures in September last year. There were roughly 106,000 divorces in 2017. That was a 5% decrease roughly from the year before. But in 2015 they were roughly the same amount as in 2017. Divorces really peaked in 1993, so that they've decreased as much as 40% now. However, people that are older are getting more divorced in this day and age. Possibly because we've got an ageing population, possibly because people are getting married later. So it's to some people to hear 106,000 divorces in a year seems pretty hefty. I did have a look at statistics for 2016, how many marriages there were. I think there were about a 250,000 mark. But there's you can't correlate the figures so much like that. But it's quite varied. The median now, the average, men get divorced between 45 and 49. Women get divorced between 40-44. The average length of a marriage that ends in divorce is about 12 years. So lots of facts. In practice myself, I've seen people that are older getting divorced a lot more. I would say from 7 or 8 years ago. Now I've seen people that are a lot older getting divorced. Sometimes it's they've stayed together a long time and they've thought kids are now married And
That's
when
like
they actually spend time together, they decide they don't like one another, or they find fault, and they decide to separate. But that's not to say, a lot of people out there live happily ever after.
Yeah, very true. So what about, in what community is there more divorces in?
I know you asked me this before the show, Jags, but I couldn't quite get a statistic for communities itself.
Okay.
Countries I had a bit more look at. I found something to say that Luxembourg had the highest divorce rate, which doesn't help us on the show, I suppose. But there's no as far as when you file a petition, I don't think the court really collates information as to ethnic origin or race or religion at the moment. So it's hard to say. What I would say is, I see varied community members getting divorced. I couldn't point a community out to you where people don't get divorced. We started off the show saying it is still a taboo subject, but over the years I've seen it get a little bit less taboo.
Do you think because of like the generations itself, because obviously now, you'd probably say within like our mum and dad's time or grandparents' time, it was a definite no. You've got to make it work. But I think for myself, obviously as the generations go on, they've become more like stronger,
resilient,
it's about, if we're not happy, that's it. There's no point in us staying together, or it's.
Well, look, I think in this generation we've got more stay-at-home dads. We've got more girl power. Ladies are, a lot more on the face of it, independent, doing so well in career-minded, driven, especially in our community. I don't think anybody's afraid anymore to say how they feel, and the tolerance level of people has gone down. That's not to say that people give up easily on marriage, but back in the day, I think there would have been a lot more divorce, but possibly couples thought, we'll do it for the sake of the children.
That's it.
And what will the community think? And I think nowadays, and what I think is important is people put themselves first in terms of their happiness. It's all right, an auntie you see twice a year saying, don't do this, your dad won't like this, when you're suffering. When you're in a relationship that's not loving, or possibly you're suffering from domestic abuse or violence, and it's a different day and age now, I think, and I think it is becoming less taboo, as I said. I'm not saying it's the most popular subject in the Asian community, but I think people are doing more to know where they stand and what they're entitled to, and where they should go if they're aggrieved.
And what about yourself as a solicitor, working day in, day out on cases and everything? Have you had any case that's been very, very difficult for you, or to you they're all kind of like similar in many ways, or?
I think every case brings its...
Or they're different as well.
Yeah, every case, as we said before, rests on its own facts. I've dealt with matters where, we've been down the road, and I'm acting for people that are very local. I've acted for people that are not so local, and their sort of affairs are spread sort of around the globe. And they've got land abroad, assets abroad, large pensions, and they got married abroad, and they're thinking, well, hang on, if we got married abroad, can we get divorced here? Yeah, of course you can.
Okay.
So it's every case rests on its facts. I mean, at the end of the day, for me, acting on a matter, it's not so much the complexity; it's getting the result or seeing satisfaction on your client's face at the end of the case, and seeing that they've got the desired outcome, especially in a matrimonial matter or a family law matter, where they're fighting for a cause. Or trying to settle something that they believe is well deserved in relation to the facts of their own case.
And if there was someone who wanted to go or file a divorce, what would be the process? Because this is the one thing that a lot of them get pretty scared of, and especially it's costly as well.
Yeah.
It's there's always a price attached to it, isn't it? And there are many people out there who feel that they can't afford to divorce, so they'll just think to themselves, do you know what, I can't afford it, I might as well just stay in this either abusive relationship or marriage. But how, if you can acknowledge, or you know that someone's in this kind of marriage which they shouldn't be in, how do you actually help them? What are the processes, and I don't know exactly what you need to say exactly how it will be, but is it of high cost, or is there any way that you can help as well? Well,
just to give you an example of the court fee, I mean, when I first started out, the court fee to file a divorce was, I think, £340. Today it's £550. I think it went up to £410 in between. So we've got £210 within sort of 7 or 8 years on a petition. Legal aid is really no longer available. There's been mass cuts for legal aid. What I will say, and I'm glad you've mentioned it, is if you feel you can't afford it, the court still assists you in terms of possibly having your fee reduced or remissed or totally excused. For example, today I advised somebody who said, look, this is my monthly income, and I then told them that they could possibly have the court fee reduced. Right. They were a little surprised, and they said, well, hang on, we thought, so you do legal aid? No, we don't do legal aid, but the court is still saying we will still consider your circumstances. If you're on a benefit, or if your income is of a level that the court clearly sees you cannot afford a court fee, they will excuse it. Legal fees, people like myself, that there will be fees. But of course there are options. There are companies that finance the matters that we work closely with. Instalments. Look, where myself, Harjap, we like to help the local community or assist people who can't face the prospect of sometimes getting advice. And I think what the most important thing is, forget about what the court fee is, forget about what the solicitor's fees are going to be. Get up, get out, go get that advice. And the majority of lawyers out there, you'll no doubt find people that are willing to spend half an hour, 45 minutes with you for free to say, look, right, sorry to hear your situation, but this is what we feel you can do. And that, we sometimes in the evening watch a drama, we watch Corrie, EastEnders, it's half an hour, there's a lot of content. Imagine what you could get from a qualified professional within 30, 45 minutes. It's important you do that. Walking through the doors of a solicitor's office doesn't mean you've started a process. Yeah. You're there as you'd be at the doctor's or at the dentist's. Or indeed, walking into Tesco's or Morrison's, you haven't entered into anything that you've got to do, but at least you know where you stand. Yeah,
and I think that's the most important thing.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah, because quite a lot of them, first thing they will ask is, how much is it?
How much is it?
Right. They get scared and then they just like, but I'm glad you've actually mentioned that, because as you said, that sometimes you can help them by giving that advice for free, half an hour, 45 minutes. But I'm not saying for all.
You make such an important point. Yeah. I've seen matters where people have come and thought that's expensive, 2 years down the line I've seen them and they're saying, I wish I'd done that at that point, because now this asset has disappeared, now this money has been hidden, now this thing's gone abroad, and they're sort of literally aggrieved at the fact that they've missed out on an opportunity. And it's especially in matrimonial matters, sometimes time is of the essence. You have to take action. And I know, and this is where sometimes I get a lot of matters where somebody can't afford it, but family will come together and say, look, you need to do this and we'll help you. And sometimes that's nice to see. But before worrying about cost and expense, get the advice, see where you stand, see what your options are, and then take things from there.
Well, thank you so much. I could just probably go on and on, because there's so much.
There is.
So much contact, but you never know, we might just call you back again.
Thank you.
Talk about.
And thank you
so much. And is there anything that you'd like to say to anyone who's watching this, and maybe they could be watching and thinking, look, and you've probably answered majority of their questions, but is there anything that you'd like to say to
I'd just say, look, as me and Jags have been discussing, the law in this area can be quite complicated for if you're going to rely on say a friend or Google to inform you what steps to take. What I would advise is if you have an issue, you feel that it needs addressing, there are children, assets, things of this nature involved, then take advice. Taking advice, as I said, 30-45 minutes. Most solicitors are offering this for free. It's important you take heed of that, take advantage of that, go out there, get the advice, and then address issues you have.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Gurvinder.
Thanks, Jags, for having
so
me on the
nice
show.
having you on the show. And if you would like to have any contact details on Gurv Bassi from GLS Solicitors, I'm sure you can find him on Google, but by all means get in contact with ourselves on 07947 182 703. But let's not go down the Google thing. It's all about being direct, going and meeting the solicitor in person who will advise you correctly. And there's options there as well. But as we say, Jags Chat Lounge, real life, real stories, real talk.